Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this week's episode of My First Sketch at myfirstsketch.com. I'm Josh Hyam. As always, feel free to subscribe to the show on iTunes or on SoundCloud and get it automatically. You can catch the show on the Stitcher app as well. You can like the podcast on Facebook at facebook.com/myfirstsketch, and you can email me at josh@myfirstsketch.com. You can follow me on Twitter at myfirstsketch. Here's the second half of my chat with Brian Craig. In the first half, we talked about the start of Secret Pants and Sweetish. In this part, we talk about specific characters he's done, like fastball pitcher Bob Gutierrez, and the pro wrestling personality Wink Vavasaur, and a little bit more. So here you go. Fastball pitcher Bob Gutierrez.
Sure. Old friend.
I don't know how many times I've ever seen him live, but every once in a while I do go down the rabbit hole of all the videos online and just like...
There's not a ton,
but I will watch,
like 3 or 4.
Watch and rewatch. Like, that character to me is so weird, so fun.
He's got a mind of his own.
Entirely.
And that's, like, I'm being a little facetious, but it really is amazing to put a mask on, essentially, and just being able to say anything you want being behind a mask is my favorite thing in the world. If I were an actor in Hollywood or something, I would be a character actor for sure. I'm not a leading man. I'm a character actor. Yeah. I can disappear into a role. I love it. I love disappearing.
You'll be the police chief with 3 pages in the movie.
Like, absolutely.
How much of fastball pitcher Bobby Gutierrez is he scripted completely, like, or do you get on stage and like just go? Like, does it become like a
lot
second
of it
mind
is
thing?
None. It's weird. There's a story I heard about how Sacha Baron Cohen did the Borat movie.
Okay.
And he had a team of writers. This is fascinating to me. He had a team of writers writing jokes, and then he would memorize all those jokes and just have them in his arsenal. And then he would go out into the real world and interact with people. And then when a scenario would come up, he had this joke to pull out of his, if I'm making analogies, he's got a quiver of bows and he's pulling arrows out and shooting them.
That feels
and they're
really hard.
landing. It's crazy hard. It's crazy hard. So to answer your question, I have all of fastball pitcher Bob Gutierrez. It's a very in-depth backstory. And so knowing... and this is so dumb and actory, but knowing everything that
absolutely.
Anchors all of the stuff is from a place inside of him.
But I think
every time Johnny Goodtimes asks me to do a Quizzo Bowl every year, and it's every February, and he's like, all right, how about this crazy idea? What if Bob is this, or what if Bob is that? I'm like, well, Bob exists in his universe, so you have to. I have to figure out in my head how the crazy thing you want him to do makes sense in fastball's world, and then kind of retroactively or reverse engineer why a thing that we're doing exists. Then it is real to fastball.
And that's the thing. You mentioned the Christopher Guest movies earlier. That's the script.
That's exactly
the character breakdown, the biography of that person.
That's exactly it.
7
Yeah,
pages.
so it's very Christopher Guest.
And then you have
fastball's very
the light story, but through it. But
so he's an outline.
Yeah.
Fastball pitcher Bob Gutierrez is a very detailed outline, and then bouncing it off in different directions and that. And then I try to keep a mental tally of every. Even though I'm the only one that has seen fastball every single time he's done, every truth that he says on stage stays true. Okay. It stays true forever. And so,
which also sounds like a lot of work.
And so the video you saw of fastball pitcher Bob Gutierrez getting punched in the balls because he's wearing a cup, and he says, "Always wear a cup every day of your life." Every time I do fastball pitcher Bob Gutierrez, I'm wearing a cup.
Okay.
There's never an instance where I'm not wearing a cup. It almost never comes up.
I was gonna say, there's no reason for you to be wearing a cup. I almost never reference it anymore.
But the fact that fastball pitcher Bob Gutierrez always wears a cup, even if I only said that once. The fact that I said it once, it might come back. Someone will be like, "Oh, you're wearing a cup right now. Punch him in the nuts." Oh, he's still wearing a cup. Oh, good. He's still wearing a cup.
List number 3: punch fastball pitcher in the nuts. Like,
I only do him once or twice a year, but if you punch him in the nuts, he will get a little seasick, but he'll be all right because he's wearing a cup every single day of his life. And that's a good. In fact, when you ask me the question later, and you say, "What have you learned?" I'm gonna say, "Always wear a cup." It's good advice. You never know, Josh. You never know when you're gonna get punched.
So now it's part of Brian Craig's character that he always has to wear a cup.
That's not true. It's a good idea. I'm just saying it's a good idea. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna hold to it, but it's a good idea. Always wear a cup.
So, Secret Pants was my entry to Philadelphia comedy.
Yes.
And the way I found out about Philadelphia comedy was Bryce Remsburg is a referee for professional wrestling companies, and the one company had in his like profile autobiography part a link to Secret Pants. That's how I found out about Secret Pants. As I start watching this company, Chikara, and just randomly at one of these shows, I want to say it was in Reading. You're just randomly there, and you're generally quite dapper and like decently attired.
Oh, thanks, Josh.
But you're at a wrestling show and you're wearing your normal suit and
I'm dressed
tweed
to
and
the
whatever
nines,
it was. You know, my brother, I'm like, that's a dude in Bryce's group. What's he here for? Like, I've never seen you before. Like, what are you doing? And then it evolves to the point where you're now.
I remember that show.
I
was handing out business. Like, I was kind of like off to this.
You would occasionally glad hand.
What's the load? What's this going on here? And I handed a business card, and it was kind of like an under like.
Because I think I remember
bubbling under the surface
there being
with
like the internet dorks being like, this guy was handing out business cards. Who is this
He's
guy?
got a Chikara logo on his business card. Who is this guy?
So it turns out that you are the corporate representative that's now in charge of this wrestling company.
Yeah.
Why? How does this happen? Like, other than, I'm assuming now that you mentioned it earlier, Bryce saying, "Hey, can you help me with?"
And Bryce also knows what my wheelhouse is. So after, and I will admit, doing Wing Vavasor was hard for me because of how me it is, like how me I looked. Like I'm dressed as myself.
Yeah. There's
and I've established that
there's no difference.
I don't
in the
like
look of Wing.
I don't like not having a mask on. I can get on stage as a crazy character. I can walk around. I can walk. In fact, I'll be doing it again next week. I can walk around Old City, Philadelphia, dressed as Ben Franklin, and do my little chit-chatting with people and posing for pictures. I have no problem being an outgoing person, not as myself. But I don't like I'm very introverted as
Wing
myself.
Very much looks like you.
Yeah, Wink looks like me very much.
Very much.
And so that was tough for me. But after doing fastball for however many years I did it, Bryce is like, "Oh, Brian's good at just interacting with fans. Like he could talk and kind of like riff. Improv's not the right word, but like ad-libbing and being a character, like putting a character on."
Yeah.
So when they had, I guess when the powers that be behind Chikara figured out, like, oh, here's the next step in our storyline. We need somebody that can do this character. Bryce, like, oh, I got a guy that can put a mask on and be a character. This would be right in his wheelhouse, which it was tough for me standing in an audience of wrestling fans. Like, I grew up as a kid watching wrestling, but then once I kind of aged out of it, I had no interest in it.
And I also think it's fair to say that the Chikara fan is different than
absolutely
every other pro wrestling fan out there.
Yes.
Like, there's a entire like insanity to being a Chikara fan on top of...
For sure. And they got most of the best fans in the world and some really terrible fans. Like I keep hearing things about the Green Lantern guy. He's
he's a tool.
Yeah. See, he's got a reputation. Just as a fan. It's so weird that the fans...
That's a problem. If you're a fan and there's a reputation about you, that's an issue.
But also, like, there's fans that have, like, they're at every show, and, like, you see them, they travel to all the different shows. It's crazy how invested those fans are in that promotion.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It is amazing. Like, I can picture... Like the one guy with the hat, he's wearing a hat. His name's Michael or Mikhail or something. Like he's at every show and like he'll talk to me. And they're all like, a lot of them are very, like they're more introverted than I am. So like it's amazing to interact with those fans, but it was also tough just for me as a person who's inside my own head a lot, to be the person with no mask on, in a sense. Like, I was doing a little bit of like, I was, putting airs on a little
your
bit.
Voice gets a little higher.
Yeah, I was doing kind of a snooty upper crust type of thing, which I'm not. I was raised very blue collar.
Yeah, you're definitely silver spoon.
Yeah.
You're running your daddy's business.
Right. And in fact, we got my dad when we shot those videos. That's my actual dad.
Okay, cool.
Because I look just like my dad.
That's fantastic.
And Bryce knew that. So when the idea of having Conrad Vavasor show up at some point, I was able to talk my dad into, who's terrible at acting. My dad is an awful actor. He's bad at line readings. He's even worse at memorizing. And so for the one shoot we did, like, we taped up his lines on the wall behind me
with Brenda or something.
Later, and children.
But like, within this character, you're forced to do like wrestling commentary, which I'm assuming is something that you've never done previously.
But it was all right. Bryce kept saying, like, the fact that you don't know anything about it makes sense because you don't know anything about it. I'm like, all right, I can do that.
Calling specific wrestlers snake face or baseball face or whatever other face you had.
Yeah.
Like,
so that was like me doing the mask thing a little bit. Like, I can talk in this guy's voice. I can be this character and say whatever I want. And like, I keep coming back to, like, being in a mask. The beauty of wearing a mask as Fastball or as Wink or as whoever, being able to, like, make a meta joke in character is great. Like, being on stage, like when I was on stage recently as Fastball, and Chip, I know, like, Chip Chantry is a huge, like, a patron of Fastball for the most part. He gets me gigs a lot.
Yeah.
Good guy, big fan. Besides, I know that Chip is a bit of a hypochondriac, and so I'm like, so in character, Fastball can say anything.
Sure.
Because the Fastball is like this lovability about him, and so, like, he's a dumb idiot.
Yeah.
And so he can do, like, a million badillion dumb stuff, and you love him.
Yeah, he has permission to do whatever.
Right.
Like,
so I can.
he's forgivable. For
I can congratulate Chip on his recent marriage as Fastball and being like, oh, she have good health insurance? I'm sure it does. Oh, because I was giving him a piece of food that I had already taken, like an audience member had taken a bite, and I took a bite. I'm like, all right, Chip, hey there, Chip, don't you take a bite of this? You don't have any, you're not like hypochondriac or anything, are you? You would have no problem putting this piece of food in your mouth. Those other people's lips have touched it there.
How long do you do Wink?
So I did Wink probably for 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. Went to all the Philly shows. Went to 1 or 2 out of town shows.
I was gonna say, you were mostly tri-state.
Yeah, I went to the Baltimore show once. I went to a show in New York. Like, I drove to the Baltimore one, but I tagged along in the car with Bryce. It was Bryce, Sarah Del Rey. Me and Sarah Del Rey were in the back of the car, and I think Eddie Kingston was in the front with Bryce.
Okay.
So I got to, like, I felt like I was with Chikara royalty at that point. It was great. And watching, like, so you're familiar with Sarah Del Rey.
Yes.
And she's, like, she has, my favorite thing was just hearing her talk about going to the grocery store, because, like, they're very, like, her and Claudio are very, like, we're bodybuilders. We keep to this very strict diet. And so
tons of almonds, if I remember correctly.
And she, while we were driving in the car, it got to the point where she's like, all right, I have to eat now. And she started, like, immediately like that, started getting just grumpy and moody. And I'm like, geez Louise. Like, watching her turn at the point where she should have eaten her next mini meal or whatever, it was great. But she was talking about...
Did she have it all, like, ready?
She had...
or was it in the trunk?
She was sitting there eating dry oatmeal out of a Ziploc bag with a travel spoon that she keeps with her all times. It was amazing. It was just fantastic. And then listening to them just having conversations about people they know.
But now Sarah Del Rey she was one of the best female wrestlers in the world, and now she's
terrific.
One of the head trainers
for WWE.
In WWE, like
In their their training
she's
program
like
down
number
in LA.
2 down there,
Yeah.
like in their school. It's just crazy to me, like, and awesome.
Yeah, she's great. I miss hanging out with her. So my two of my favorite things about doing Wink are the things that the audience never really saw. Writing the blogs was one of my favorite things
You
because
actually did write them?
I wrote most of Wink's blogs.
Okay.
Mike Quackenbush would give me like, we want. Here's what we're going for. Like, here's the storyline that Wink's trying to do. Just figure out how to do that. And the one thing, they were doing the 12 large competition, the 12 large tournament.
There was a huge round robin tournament to crown the first champion.
And just like the way I do with fastball, like if everything has to make sense in his universe, like the thing, like so, I had to figure out a way to make whatever grading system they came up with, like however like their ranking system, every wrestler was ranked and they had to fight each other. But how did those rankings come about? That was I had to figure out. I had to explain that to the blog audience in a bit. So I came up with the Chikara Barometrics thing. That was straight out of me. So I took sabermetrics and I transposed it on top of wrestling, which I thought was so hilarious. And so I'm like, oh, what if we waited like in the way that like two strikes is weighted like in if you go deep into sabermetrics in baseball. And this is so like using the phrase inside baseball for this thing we're talking about with baseball. Just for the audience, this is very inside baseball. So sabermetrics, where they kind of like everything gets like a point system, and it gets a little tedious and ridiculous, but it's amazing.
Part of the storyline of your character is within this Chikara Barometrics. That I'm going to say incorrectly.
Well, it's not a real word,
right? But you split up,
and it came from sabermetrics, which the BR of sabermetrics stood for like baseball reports or something.
Yeah, like it.
Which a nerdy fan pointed out in the message board. The BR stands for baseball something around. Like, come on, man.
You split up the teams. Like, you split up a bunch of, like, beloved teams and created new characters. You created the GoBot versions of Transformers for the tag team of Ants.
Right. So that was essentially, Mike said, all right, we're gonna split all these people up. So write a blog about why we're splitting them up. And so I knew that Wink doesn't know anything about wrestling, but he's a numbers guy, so he would know sabermetrics.
Sabermetrics
so
makes sense.
The relationships that these people had to each other, much like in baseball, those relationships you can't quantify.
Right.
So the relationships in a tag team you can't quantify on this spreadsheet, but 2 counts, which I thought was the funniest thing in the world. This guy gets a lot of 2 counts, so that's going to be weighted higher than this guy that gets 3 counts, but he doesn't get that many of them. But this guy gets a lot of 2 counts. So he's going to be weighted as a better wrestler than the guy who wins matches. It's so stupid.
The fact that you wrote it, I'm very pleased, like, in retrospect. Like,
this Chikara Barometrics was probably one of my favorite things that came out of that time as Wink.
Is Wink dead?
He was put into a plastic bag. He was put into a garbage bag by a big guy at one point in the video.
But so he's dead. Like,
I don't know.
Because
I know that I can't ever go to a wrestling show ever again.
List number 5.
I don't think it was ever said to me, but I knew like as I signed up for when at the beginning.
You're no longer.
I'm like, I can't. Like I'd been to a couple like arena shows when Bryce gave us free tickets earlier on, and so like going to that first show in Reading, I'm like, I can never come back. I can't do this again as me.
Right.
So like this is me never.
Yeah, if you and I go to the next Chikara show,
then all the kids on the message board would be like, "Oh, Wink's back."
Like, stuff will go down. And
I will be spoken to.
Conspiracy theories.
I imagine I will be spoken to behind the scenes.
Right, I'm sure. List number 6. Let's play that game. Like...
But the other thing that I loved about doing Wink, and this was behind the scenes that the fans never got to see, is that I got to become friends with a lot of those guys, and they're like, much like how comedy people are real people. These wrestlers, well, they all like, so like they they've got their things. Everyone's got their other stuff. Like, we've all got comedy, but we all got our other stuff. All these wrestlers are wrestlers. They're all big wrestling fans or bodybuilding type guys. But they all have, like, the things that they're fans of. Some of them are very dorky stuff that I can't identify with, like, video games and whatever. But Ultramantis Black, much like me, is a huge fan. And Mr. Zero. You know Mr. Zero, right? Mr. Zero and Ultramantis Black are both big, like, mid-century modern furniture guys. So I would be. We bought our the couch, the love seat that's in the basement, and you'll see it when you go to use the bathroom in the basement. The love seat in the basement we bought from Mr. Zero.
That's fantastic. That's so cool.
So I would be in the back, like in the locker room. I was gonna say green room. That's. The world of wrestling, the world of comedy are so...
I infinitely prefer... I'm really happy you said locker room versus backstage.
Yeah.
That's a thing that bugs me about wrestling.
I don't know that I ever saw a locker back there.
But still.
It was almost entirely backstage.
I hate the term backstage for wrestling.
But it was great. I would... And Zia's friends with Ultramantis Black. Zia Helty, who is...
From Youth Large.
Who knows everyone. She knows everyone.
Photographer for Chikara, yeah.
If you know anything about anything, you know Zia. Yeah. And so she's friends with Ultramantis Black, and she kind of introduced us. And so we would just stand in the back talking about, like, lane furniture, like mid-century, like, coffee tables. And he would tell me about, like, his latest finds, like, things that he found at a thrift store. And I told him about this. I found an Eames chair for $45 at a thrift store. And if anybody who's listening right now understands what finding an Eames chair at a thrift store for $45 means, it's... I don't know what their head just popped off their body.
Like, wow.
Their head just... I mean, it was like a knockoff Eames chair, obviously. It's not a real one. But that's also in the basement. You'll see that. Because you drank 2 beers at our house, you're going to have to use the bathroom before you leave. And you're going to get to see some cool furniture. Josh.
That Ultraman's backlight lights.
So standing backstage talking to a wrestler about furniture was terrific.
With giant sleeves of tattoos, with a bug mask on.
He's got the greatest tattoos.
Yeah.
And he's doing his like
the resistance
bands. Yeah, the resistance bands as he's talking.
I love it.
Just picture that.
I love it. That's fantastic. Again, just for me.
That was for you. You can put this on the whatever part of the website if you want to not make this. It's entirely up to you. I listen to all those too. They seem to just be wrestling themed.
Yeah.
The extras. All of the extras go to the side. All the wrestling extras go to the side. That's fine.
So back to comedy. Back to comedy. What have you learned from comedy?
I've learned this doing. Here's the thing. All right, it's gonna sound awful. I'm gonna sound like a jerk saying this, but if I were to impart any wisdom, it would be this: never be happy. Right? Like, never be content with anything you do, you could have done better.
Sure.
Never being content with what you produced.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that bugs me. Like, I mentioned the prop board before. Jesus, man. It kills me how backslappy everyone is about what a great job everyone did. I feel like I've never done a good job ever. And I'll never be happy.
Sure, okay.
My best will never be good enough. And I feel like it's, in some regards, that's a terrible way to go into something, but in some regards, always thinking you can do better is a great way to be.
I think that's definitely a fair way of looking at it, because like I don't think I've had shows I've been very proud of, and I've done things that I'm like, yeah, that worked. But like, there's always
there should always be a but.
There should always
be a but.
I could have done this, I could have done that.
Right.
Like,
and I'm friends with a lot of house team members, and I remember Dan Corkery being unhappy after, like, coming out of a show and being like, boy, I'm not happy about that. I felt pride.
Yeah.
I'm like, good. You should feel like you could have done better.
Yeah.
You should always feel like you could have done better.
Yeah.
And like at a certain point, that's a little destructive. It's a little self-destructive to be like, I'm never good enough.
Sure.
And I get that. I agree. Like to an extent, everything I say to an extent, but also like you shouldn't be content with the job you just did. You should always be striving for more. I mean, it's like I said, it's not a great.
But if you have a show that is in your mind perfect,
right?
Why do another? Like,
right.
I get that sense. Yeah. Like,
and we were just talking before we turned the mics on about all these scripts that are terrible in this folder. And God, if I was still if I never progressed,
right? Which is the part.
Good God,
the point of
you gotta keep progressing.
To see someone at the beginning to see where they are now. Like, that's the whole point.
That is the premise of your show, and I appreciate it. And I while I don't disagree with Joe Moore's criticism of not wanting anyone to see the terrible stuff, just what about what I've done recently? I don't disagree with that, but I do appreciate seeing, especially people that have been doing it for so long. Yeah. I imagine that seeing how terrible I used to be, and I still think I'm terrible. I'll never, again, like I said, I'll never be happy.
Let's not think that you're terrible. Let's go a little bit higher than.
You can say whatever you want, Josh. I know what I am.
On a scale of 1 to 10, let's at least say you're a 4. If terrible's a 2, let's say 4 or 5. Come on.
I'm like I lack ambition a little, but I also said I don't like losing. So like there's that.
Even though you're not competitive.
Right, I'm not competitive. Like I'm not going out of my way to try, but if I'm gonna start doing something, I'm gonna do it right.
Yeah.
And I feel like I wish. If it's worth doing, it's doing right was the motto that more people had.
Sure.
That I feel like is the takeaway that I want people to get from me. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Keep editing. Never stop editing until you over-edit, which is a thing I've certainly done before. Over-editing is the problem, but you'll figure it out. There's one sketch.
Whatever.
So you mentioned when Rob Banowitz tore off the first 2 pages of your sketch.
Yeah.
We had a Swedish had a sketch once where it was like I felt like the first 2 pages, it was about having a new pet. It was a family that had just had a baby and they just had a kitten. And we were talking about like, oh well, your porn name is. The street you grew up on, and the name of your first pet. Yep. So this baby that you just had, you better name that pet something cool.
Okay.
Like that better be
good premise.
So that was the premise of the sketch. But then we're like, all right, well, I feel like we're over explaining at the beginning. Everyone gets this, right?
Right.
And then so we took out literally the first page and a half, and we just chopped it, and then we started it right into like, all right, so what are you gonna like and we're like, oh, the audience doesn't understand what.
Right.
We cut off too much.
You might have left a paragraph that you.
Like, we should have had some exposition.
Porn name. Let's go. Let's go with that.
We cut out all the exposition.
You guys in the audience know about porn name, right? Like.
And we started.
This is where we're getting to.
We started in media res to throw another college term at you. Yeah, that was an editing misstep. But beyond that, like, take a red pen to everything.
Yeah.
Keep taking a red pen. Never be happy with your most recent draft. Keep doing it. Keep fixing it.
And I mean, you mentioned so many reasons, but why do you keep doing this? Why? Like as much as we like, Secret Pants isn't as active as it once was.
Right. And we're not in LA.
You're a comedy troupe in Philadelphia. 5 friends, 2 guys that show up every once in a while. Mainly your big show, your big blow off is a Christmas show, which putting on a major show, busiest time of the year is just bananas to me.
I don't recommend that.
And yet you're still doing it in a few weeks.
The audience keep telling us how much it means to them.
Entirely just for me at this point. Like,
this, and I'll announce the date, but we don't have a title yet. December 22nd.
December 22nd.
It's a Friday. They finally gave us a Friday.
And I know a couple of the acts involved. Brian Kelly spilled some beans for me. I won't say those out
loud. We're not final. Nothing's finalized yet. Today we were talking about a name because the Johnny Brenda's already.
You need to put it up on the website.
Yeah, they want to start selling tickets. But why do I keep doing it? I mentioned being control freak, and I mentioned having kind of not being able to turn shit off in my brain. This is the only voice I really have to say anything, more or less. And I am realistic enough to know that my talent, I'm good at doing this. I'm not going on TV. Like, I'm not gonna be the guy that moves to LA and gets a job.
Michaels isn't gonna snatch you out of the crowd and
right. And even if I'm close, like, I'd have to work harder at that. I'd have to build that muscle a little stronger, and I'd have to move. And I don't want to. I don't want to. I'm rooted. Yeah. I'm 35 years old, and I got my roots, and I'm not naive enough to think that I'm gonna make it.
Right.
And so I've resigned myself isn't the right word. I haven't resigned myself, but I know. I know that I have things to say about life, right? And this is really the only outlet I have to do it.
Okay.
Like, I've got, my hobbies outside of this. Not much. I don't have a ton of hobbies. I like vintage furniture, and I'm good at sewing and making stuff.
Right.
I'm a maker, which is probably a topic for a separate podcast at some point. I could start telling people how to make stuff. Like, that's a job I could probably do. Get cardboard. Step 1, cardboard.
I feel like that's like a DIY network show. Like, comedy props. Here we go. Let's do it.
But I think Amy Sedaris is kind of I haven't watched it yet either. I'm excited to watch it though. But yeah, so like in the last couple of years, I've started writing less silly stuff and more personal things. And I feel like I'm certainly enjoying that a lot more. And like, I'm writing things that I don't even know if they're funny, but they're meaningful to me.
Right. I mean, you bring that up, and the first thing I think of is the monologue that you did at a Swedish show a couple months ago, and then you redid it at the monologue show at Fit.
Right. I was a Secret Pants show.
Okay, Secret Pants, sorry. Where...
And I'm still not sure if that sketch is funny.
Right.
I don't even know if it's funny.
There are laughs.
I don't know if it needs to be funny.
There are laughs in it, but it is still a very poignant, real, good, like, in the best way to say the word good.
And I've been doing this.
To do.
That came in, so I've been doing it for 12 years. I feel like that sketch may have been like I feel like that's like the first. I finally hit that first step. Like, that's my sunset tree. If there's any Mountain Goats fans listening, I feel like all the years before that were leading up to actually doing something, like having a voice.
Right.
And like, one of my major pet peeves about watching, like, as an audience member, watching stuff, being very critical of watching stuff, sketches that just don't say anything.
Right.
Like, not every sketch obviously needs to have a message.
Sure.
But having a voice in your sketch, and having a voice to your show, like a voice throughout your show,
beneficial of knowing the writer's point of view.
Right.
At the end of a sketch.
Yeah, having a point of view is... I feel like I finally figured out that I have... 12 years in, I have a point of view. And this is the only outlet I have to express that point of view with that, really. So I think that's why I'm still doing it. I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, like I said before, I'm hopefully something will fall in my lap kind of guy, but I'm also realistic to the fact that this isn't I'm not Hollywood material. If anything, I'm a character actor. Right. But like, I'm not getting rich off of this. This is the me having a voice in the world that most people, like, people you talk to at work, they're like, "Oh, what did you do this weekend?" "Oh, I just my kids played outside and I watched TV." I'm like, "All right, well, that sounds like something."
I wrote this sketch about my phone number.
I talked about domestic violence on stage in a funny way, and it broke my heart, and I cried on stage every time I do it. But it was meaningful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the answer to your question. Why do I still do it? I don't know. I mean,
the fact that you guys in Secret Pants, the 5 of you, have been together, I think, Sam, you are the most recent addition of that 5, or
that was like by a couple weeks.
But I'm saying, I'm still saying, like,
at the same time. I feel like
that's about right. Like the people that were at, going back to that first,
the first meeting versus the piano bar meeting, like,
that was when we graduated college and a few weeks after we
okay,
graduated college.
so it's not even like saying the most recent doesn't even mean anything.
By a couple weeks.
Kelly came in at the same time.
But so the people that were actually in that comedy workshop.
But you've been working with these 5 people for 12, 13 years now, which is
13.
Just bonkers to me, because this podcast is my longest running project, and this is just by myself. But like, I had a sketch group that only lasted 9 months. Yeah, and it flamed out, and
I mean, that makes sense.
Blew up. Like, but you guys have been together for 13
I feel
years.
like that's more the norm, than anything else. So like, we're not the norm.
But I'm trying to figure out how.
Well, about 6 of those years were wasteland years.
But you were still doing video. You were still doing like. We
weren't putting out good material. I think hardly anything still holds up. We just kept. We didn't really have anything.
Learning.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, and none of us. Here's a question you didn't ask, but I'll give you the answer. Did I take any classes? No.
No, right.
Classes didn't exist. I took that workshop, but that was
School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, School of Hard Knocks. But he didn't. It's not like he was teaching us anything.
You guys didn't have. Like, I had Brian Kelly and Paul Trigiani, and then Kevin Allison.
Right. But that worked.
To tell me. That comedy workshop. This is working. This isn't working.
We didn't even get that though.
Right.
The comedy workshop was literally just, all right, we're gonna turn on the lights, and you guys have free reign to use this studio space. If you want to go off into that room over there and write, or if you want to do this over here, you're welcome to do it. I'm gonna go sit over here. Yeah. Like Rob Stoller, him giving us that opportunity was huge.
But he was the babysitter in the room.
Right. Like we didn't learn how to put a TV show on. We were given the opportunity to put a TV show on, right?
Which is a big difference.
Yeah. And in fact, there was one of the last days of class. So he said, we're going to put on like an SNL type show. And also everyone has to write 5 minutes of stand up, and we're going to perform it for each other. Okay. And so
for each other, that's the problem.
It's like we were the audience, and everyone kind of got in a line, and you did your thing, and you got off the microphone. It was
That sounds awful.
It was awful. I've done stand up as myself 3 times in my life. Okay. I've done fastball as like a variation on stand up plenty of times.
Right.
It's real easy with the mask.
It works within a stand up context because it's a character, and like that's fine.
But as myself, woo. Yikes. So that was the first time. And then my very first time doing real stand-up was at a Helium open mic. I signed up. Rob Fioretta, who was also in Secret Pants, encouraged me to do it. He was trying to put his hat into the stand-up ring. My very first time as Helium open mic, I was the first performer. I signed up.
Was there a host?
There was a host. It was Tim Grill.
Okay, so there was at least a little bit of...
And then he brought me out, and I kind of just treaded water for 5 minutes, and by 5 minutes I mean 3 minutes, and then I put the microphone back in the stand, and I was done. And I tried it one more time, and I'm like, I don't like this. This is not the thing that I'm good at. But I've been on Helium stage as fastball. I've done very well as fastball. That was a blast.
Okay, so now I mean we're just veering off wherever we're going now. You mentioned having a point of view and learning and being more. Would you revisit stand-up with this new thought of point of view?
And now that I'm more confident on stage, it's a thing I've thought about. Like, if Secret Pants were to end at some point, which doesn't seem to be the case, we're just going to keep kind of petering from Christmas to Christmas.
Because I will ask in January, hey, when's the Christmas show? When we do the Christmas show?
I've idly thought about doing stand-up again as myself. It's a thing I might revisit. I've also thought about designing women's clothing, which seems like a more likely scenario because I'm pretty good at sewing. I'm pretty good at we haven't even touched that iceberg of,
So we'll see.
of making stuff.
So we'll see Brian on Project Runway before we see Brian on Last Comic Standing.
I think we've talked about competition before. I don't like competition.
But you don't want to lose.
I don't want to lose, so I would never enter.
Okay. We'll do something with lower stakes.
Yeah. Oh, stakes. Yeah, it's all about stakes. It's all about relationships.
List number 7 on the lower stakes Project Runway.
Yeah. There's no competition. You're just kind of hanging out. Just seeing what each other does.
But in a way, it is a little bit of a competition.
Tim Gunn randomly shows up, like, oh yeah.
But somebody is always the worst.
Yeah.
And
Somebody's always the best.
And you and I are the ones in the audience snickering about
Yes.
it.
Swedish presents their final shows, Swedish Fully Accredited, at the Philly Improv Theater on November 17th and 18th at 9 p.m. Tickets are available at fitcomedy.com. You should go. I really think you should. Also, Secret Pants will host their annual holiday extravaganza at Johnny Brenda's on Friday, December 22nd. More information will be released over the next couple weeks, and tickets will be on sale soon. And it's another show I think you should go to. Next week, during Black Friday Comedy Marathon, you can see me host my game show, The Big Freakin Quiz with Josh Hyam, on Saturday, November 25th at 2:28 p.m. I have 6 great contestants lined up: Brendan Kennedy, Keen Cobb, Cynthia Marie, Quentin Alexander, Chris Hodge, and Rachel Greenman. My First Sketch is a Philly Sketchfest production. You can find out more information at phillysketchfest.com or on Twitter at PHLSketchfest. Also, for more information about comedy in Philly, head to watercooler.com. The music on this episode is by the band No No, which you can check out at nonoband.bandcamp.com. Like My First Sketch on Facebook. This is Josh Hyam. Thanks for listening. Go see some comedy.
Oh, here's the thing I forgot to mention. Like, one of the things that I'm just gonna say it like you're gonna cut this in. Like, one of the things that I've learned is that having people whose opinions you respect, give you criticism, and being able to take that criticism is probably one of the most important things about sketch comedy. And so, like, having a group of friends that you respect or whose opinions are relatively good, telling you whether something's good or bad is invaluable.